NASA had said that they were working towards a Starliner 1 cargo-only mission as soon as April. And if that was successful, that could be followed up by a crewed mission perhaps towards the end of the year. Does that schedule still hold based on what we have heard today about the various steps you believe need to be taken before Starliner is ready to fly crew, or will that schedule be altered in some way?
Well, I think a no earlier than date is just no earlier than date. I mean, what we don't want to do is perpetuate past problems by establishing, endless target launch dates that we were unable to meet. I think right now, our focus here at NASA is working alongside Boeing, again, to understand the technical challenges that have caused these service module and crew module thruster issues, to remediate them, make sure we have a full understanding of the risk associated with this vehicle, implement the report, the recommendations from the report, and get back to flight. Now, if that happens to line up in April, then so be it. And if we can follow that on with crewed missions, that's fantastic as well. As I mentioned, I think there's going to be endless demand for crew and cargo access to low Earth orbit, well beyond the design life of the International Space Station. But we are not going to fly again, crew or uncrewed, until it's ready.
And next we will go to Eric Berger with Ars Technica.
Hi, thanks very much for doing this. A couple questions. First of all, Jared, how widespread were the leadership failures in this case on NASA's part? And what does there will be leadership accountability actually mean? Are we talking about program changes at commercial crew, elsewhere at HEO, or sort of what could happen?
Well, in terms of what were the leadership failures, to provide more specificity, leading up to launch, while the astronauts were on space station and we were evaluating what actually transpired and what are our options to bring these astronauts home, and then after they came home, there was a continuous, the overarching programmatic objective of dissimilar crewed access was continued to be introduced into the conversation when mission and crew safety should have come first. Now, that resulted for the various NASA workforce and contractors that were involved in this process, a breakdown in culture, created trust issues, and where leadership failed was to recognize that this was taking place and to intervene and course correct. There was always an option. Everybody, even if you don't follow spaceflight closely, knew that there was always an option that could have been sent up, was inevitably going to be sent up, that could bring these astronauts home. Pretending that that did not exist, and focusing exclusively on a single pathway that was and now quite clearly a mishap, created a cultural issue that leadership should have been able to step in and course correct. What levels of the organization at inside NASA did that exist at? Multiple levels, including, I would say, right up to the administrator of NASA. I can't imagine a situation like that why there would not have been some direct involvement to bring people back to the mission and the crew and figure out the correct pathway forward, which we ultimately did arrive at. But as I mentioned in my letter and my remarks, how we got there was not the correct way.
And next, we will go to Will Robinson-Smith with Spaceflight Now.
Yes, hi. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us this afternoon. Given, obviously, that these are two very different programs, but that Boeing is the contractor behind both Starliner and the Space Launch System rocket, as we're watching the tanking tests underway now, are there any possible overlap between leadership concerns from how Starliner was handled to how the leadership where SLS is concerned has been running and is moving forward at this point in time? Thank you.
Thanks for the question. It's a good one, but what I think what the administrator said is important is the alignment between the development methodology and the test and qualification methodology. So, in the environment we're in commercial crew, in the fixed price environment where you're providing services, you have limited insight and oversight. That works depending on the hardware richness of the program and the test approach. It doesn't work if you classically develop quality built in. So that's the real difference, is that those things have to be aligned. It's not about one versus the other. It's about making sure that you're testing and qualifying according to your development approach. And so with on the core stage, even on space station, the development approach is similar in terms of how it works with the company, but at the same time, the test, the qualification, the fault tolerance, how that's levied, and how the certification is done does match up. And so in that particular case, we have less concerns because we're basically testing like we should according to the way we're building the hardware.
And we will move to Bill Harwood with CBS News.
Thank you very much. I think this is for the administrator. Given the amount of work you're talking about will be needed to hammer all of this out and get these changes made, obviously that's going to take some time. I know you guys aren't talking dates about when a crew might fly on this vehicle, but it seems like with the deadline coming for station retirement, there has to be some point where you either have to get this going or it's not worth continuing. Is there such a point, or is the plan that you're going to press ahead with Starliner regardless of how long this takes and get it flying with a crew at some point? Thanks.
And thank you for the question. I think it's important to point out we are not starting from zero here. We are sharing the results of multiple actual investigations will essentially be coming to light in the literally the hours and days ahead. But work has been taking place continuously on this program. Obviously, at the time the astronauts were on orbit, we knew we had a problem that required significant attention, so much so that, again, we have declared it a Type A mishap. Boeing and NASA has been working to try and understand these technical challenges throughout that entire time period. Now, I did want to make sure I drew attention. We have not arrived at true technical root cause as it relates to the SM and the CM thruster-related issues in this. It doesn't mean we may not be close to it. We are committed to helping Boeing work through this problem, to remediate the technical challenges, again, fully understand the risk associated with this vehicle, try and minimize it to the greatest extent possible, and if we can implement a lot of the report recommendations, then we will fly again. And I think that's important even outside the context of the International Space Station. America is not giving up its presence in low Earth orbit. We have an unbelievable internationally assembled orbiting laboratory right now that's enabled continuous heartbeat in space for more than a quarter of a century. That will not end with the International Space Station. There will be other space stations, I guarantee it, and they are going to require crew and cargo access to and from low Earth orbit. And I think the nation and the world benefits when you have multiple providers that are capable of doing that. Thank you.
And we will now move to Joey Roulette with Reuters.
Thanks. Question for Jared. As a result of this report and the findings in your letter, are there any penalties or punitive measures being taken on Boeing or against any NASA employees? And have you discussed these findings with Kelly Ortberg or any other Boeing executives? And what do they say? Thanks.
Thank you. Joey, I think kind of part of your transmission there was a little bit garbled, but if I think I've got it. If I don't, please correct me. At least throughout my evaluation of this investigation, which I began to get briefed on and started to dive into the reports and the witness statements almost immediately after I was confirmed in this role, I followed that up with a number of interviews that I wanted to have directly with those that were involved in either the incident itself, or the kind of the post-mission investigation, to kind of hear it firsthand, especially since time had gone by, and I wanted to make sure what I was reading was still as it as the parties that were involved believed it to be the case today, and. I would also say that so in that respect, I tried to have as many conversations, get as educated as I could on the situation as possible while the multiple investigations were underway, including speaking multiple times with the ASAP committee. I would also say that that I did have conversations with Boeing on this. I think they put out a public statement. I completely concur with it. Just as we are taking ownership of our shortcomings, which I think is absolutely imperative for NASA to be able to undertake our world-changing mission in air and space, they are doing the same. And I believe, and I've spoken to a number of our team members here at NASA that work closely with Boeing on Starliner, that there has been, some recognizable changes in their approach to the vehicle, and a very concerted effort to adjust the culture inside that organization. So clearly, both NASA and Boeing had work to do, and we are doing it right now.
And now we will go to Kenneth Chang with the New York Times.
Hi, thank you. This is for the Administrator. So you were saying that this result of an imbalance between insight versus oversight over Boeing. I was wondering, was this also this imbalance SpaceX just happened to do a better job? And also, are there lessons here that you're going to apply to HLS? Thank you.
He said it was to you.
I don't know. Take it. Yeah, again, the point here is that we have to have a kind of risk-based approach to how we're doing inside and oversight. You can't apply the same method to two different development processes, and so the one approach allows for kind of total openness and into the systems. One is relies a little bit on kind of fixed deliverables and how that works, and you can't just kind of spread that out. It has to be tailored according to the risks in the systems, the propulsion systems, life support systems, et cetera, need to have more than kind of a spot level of insight, and that's what we're trying to right size. I think we've learned through every iteration of the commercial services approach, and a lot of our contracting approaches to make sure that we are tailoring those things going forward in the existing developments we have that use the same approach. But again, the most important point here is that it requires that intensive application of that per system, per company, per what they do for their development, and it can't just be assumed that they're symmetrical. And I think that's really the key here in terms of how we manage these programs going forward.
And now we'll head to Jackie Waddles with CNN.
Hi, folks. Thanks for doing this. Apologies, I didn't quite hear that last question. I hope I'm not repeating anyone, but wanted to kind of piggyback off of Eric's and Will's questions. If this is more of a systemic issue within commercial crew, does this raise any concerns that oversight is also inadequate for SpaceX? And then just since Artemis 2 is on the launch pad, question for Administrator Isaacman, does it raise any concerns for you that the safety measures in place are insufficient, not just for commercial crew, but maybe more broadly within the space agency? And if your answer is no, could you detail why you're confident that these issues don't carry over? Thanks.
Were you the first part?
I didn't hear the first part.
Well, let me take the second part of the question, which is just how do I view Artemis 2 on the pad right now relative to this situation, and if I'm not concerned, why? And then if you wouldn't mind just repeating the first part of your question when it's done. As Amit mentioned, these are two very different contracting approaches. SLS is very much conceived through a traditional procurement process. We have lots of prime contractors, lots of subcontractors. NASA owns a lot of the design and the assembly of the vehicle. I would also say, versus what was a Starliner, which was designed to be procured essentially as a service in that. You can certainly see in the report that a lack of, or an inadequately applied insight and oversight into the original Starliner program is because we had very high confidence from the get-go in the manufacturer based on their past performance on other programs. And we, even after the OFT-1 and OFT-2, we still gave a lot of kind of benefit of the doubt there when we probably rightfully should have unpacked it a lot deeper, and maybe we would not have flown CFT 1 in hindsight on that. I think that's very different again from SLS. Leverages a lot of components that go back to the space shuttle program, procured and assembled in a more traditional way, and also with the mindset that this is now the most, important human spaceflight mission in more than a half century. There cannot be enough eyes on this program. I've dispatched, second and third and fourth sets of eyes during the Artemis 2 campaign. Amit has dispatched multiple sets of eyes on this. We have pre-FRRs down to the component level, the integrated level FRR. We are putting a lot of attention on this because this is a mission we do not want to get wrong. I will say, though, that part of the reason that we are having this discussion right now, leaning into transparency, and this is irrespective of the date that we're communicating it, just so happened to be during wet dress, is to make sure we are sending the right message within the workforce of NASA that we have to make the right decisions in this circumstance. Leadership has to be appropriately applied, because the situation we found ourselves in with Starliner, with CFT, could happen anywhere across the organization. And as I mentioned before, the approach we took is not compatible with human spaceflight, and we cannot allow it, not permit it to continue. And if you wouldn't mind just asking the first part of your question again, and we'll see if Amit can answer it.
Sure. Sorry about that. Yeah, it was kind of baked in a little bit to the answer there, but I was curious, since it seemed to be an indication that there was more of a systemic problem within the commercial crew program specifically. I was wondering if there was if the scope of the investigation included looking into whether oversight of SpaceX is adequate. If there was concerns that there's carryover concerns between oversight of Starliner and oversight of Crew Dragon.
Yeah, let me just to jump in without picking on any one contract or the other. I spent the first 2 months on the job trying to visit every one of the centers and gather input from the workforce and almost every one of our partners beyond just human spaceflight, our robotic missions, aeronautics. I would tell you that almost every one of them included in their formal responses back to NASA that they would prefer less oversight, more insight, less requirements, right? So I don't think that that ask is specific to any one contractor, but there are lessons to be learned here, which is, again, back to why you're transparent about this program. Certainly, taking that advice as it relates to Starliner did not lead to a good outcome. Right? I mean, this is part of why I put out my workforce directive to restore core competencies inside NASA, why we're bringing a lot of contractors back as civil servants, regaining some lost muscle memory on our engineering skills, so that we can look at situations, again, regardless of contractor, and say, you know what, this is an area that is not necessarily critical to human life, and we can take more of an insight-based approach to this, or in fact, we can let the contractors tell us what is the best way to potentially achieve this outcome or solve this particular problem. And then there are other areas, regardless of the contractor and regardless of their past success, where we are going to want to have oversight, where our requirements are going to be very specific, because if we get it wrong, the outcome goes beyond that particular contractor, but has implications across America's space agency, and that's something that we can't ever allow to happen.
And this is just a reminder that if you have a question, to press *1 to enter the queue. Next, we will head to Richard Trepo with the Orlando Sentinel.
Hi, yes, thanks for taking my question. Now that you've reclassified Starliner on the same level as Challenger and Columbia, can you speak to the gravity of that and how you'll be discussing Starliner going forward? I mean, would Challenger and Columbia be in the conversation as you discuss these things for either the administrator or Amit? Thank you.
I think just to maybe give a little background on what a Type A mishap actually means, and then if we want to go a little bit deeper than that, I can pass it over to Amit. First of all, I mean, we had a WB-57 aircraft that had a gear up landing not that long ago. Right now, that is initially classified as a Type A mishap. So, I would not. I mean, it's defined as certainly it can have a human health consequence to it, but also simply over $2 million in damages. So this is just about doing the right thing. It's categorizing the mission appropriately. If a gear up landing of an aircraft is a Type A mishap and no one was hurt, and we could declare that, then we sure as heck should do that. When we had a very severe situation in space where we did lose for a period of time 6-DOF control over the vehicle, our astronauts spent an extensive amount of time on orbit, well in excess of the original mission design. And when we did ultimately bring them back home, we had to forego 2 astronaut spots that would otherwise have been conducting good science and research on the space station. That's a Type A mishap. So sure, you can point to some moments in our history where we made some terrible mistakes and there were really bad outcomes as a result of it. Those are Type A mishaps. We have had situations where a ground-based antenna was over-rotated and caused damage that approached a Type B mishap, for example. So it's not necessarily a question, again, of a human life. Anything to add on it?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think it's, so just to be clear, and this is maybe a little pedantic, but if Challenger and Columbia vastly exceeded that threshold because of the loss of life, those were actually presidential commissions that were established to investigate those things at that level. That's not what we're suggesting here. The administrator is right that we do have procedural requirements, which, by the way, are informed by the lessons learned from those catastrophic events that lead to this mishap classification. That, strictly speaking, with respect to correcting the record, that's exactly what this means in terms of this classification. It also means that it would have invoked independent review. And we, because of the program in ISS as well as CCP, agreed to let that independent review occur. The process by which the review is conducted meets the standards according to what would have been invoked if it was a Type A mishap. And so we believe that the work has been done to identify that, the independent review, the witness statements, et cetera, the data collection that would have been done. This is simply about recognizing that we need to correct the mistake. And that according to what the administrator said, is exactly what this is.
And now we'll go to Andrea Leinfelder with the Houston Chronicle.
Hi, my question is a follow-up to that one. Is a Type A mishap literally then just something that's more than $2 million in damages? Can you clarify that? And also, when you start talking about management cultural concerns, I do think people start thinking of the shuttle, and so I'm curious if you saw any parallel to the shuttle disasters, and are there any cultural changes you're looking to make at NASA now? Thank you.
So, as I described before, Type A, Type B, Type C mishaps is relatively standardized across the government. So you hear it often referenced in Air Force or Navy-related matters when there's damages to aircraft and ships. So yes, there is a dollar threshold that's associated with it. It's depending on the service or the agency, it triggers various events, one of which in NASA would have been an independent review, which has already been conducted, and the findings of which being released today. But as Amit mentioned, this is about getting the record straight. And I do think that failure to acknowledge this as it was, which is a Type A mishap, and ensure that we are transparent and correct, management leadership missteps that could lead to an unhealthy culture is absolutely warranted. Failing to do so invites repeats of previous catastrophic events, which again is never an acceptable outcome here at NASA.
Irene Klotz with Aviation Week.
Stephanie, one clarification with the declaration of this now as a Type A mishap, does that mean that the formal investigation board, if you don't need to do one at this point? You're saying that that's already been completed, and the reclassification of the Starliner incident is it's retroactive in that sense. And Jared, has Boeing committed to you that they will stay in the Starliner program? Have you gotten any indications that they are finished with investing in this program? Thanks.
Yeah, so to answer the first part of the question, we are not conducting a new investigation. We did conduct an independent investigation, as would have been required had this been declared Type A mishap from the start. So in that respect, the work is done. The redacted reports are being made public. We're speaking to you all today. There is still ongoing work. As I mentioned before, we have not arrived at the technical root cause of the SM and RCS thruster failures, and we are working alongside Boeing in order to solve that problem and implement the report recommendations I mentioned before so we can get back to flight. I'm not going to put words in Boeing's mouth. They released a statement that I think expressed the desire to continue to work with us, as they have done since CFT-1 returned from space, to solve the problem. And I think they acknowledge what I mentioned before, which is there is going to be extraordinary and continuous demand for crew and cargo access to low Earth orbit well after the design life of the International Space Station. And I think it serves the American people, certainly our international partners in the world, to have multiple providers capable of undertaking that important work. I fully anticipate Boeing will be there.
And now we'll head to Ryan Caton of NASAspaceflight.com.
Thank you very much for doing this, Ryan Caton, NSF. A couple questions. First of all, I was just wondering if there was a Boeing representative who was invited to attend today's conference. And second, I was wondering, considering both the recent WB-57 gear-up landing and the Challenger and Columbia disasters are currently classified under the same type of mishap, if NASA's mishap definitions are sufficient for the modern day. Thank you.
So, as I mentioned, the mishap categorization is relatively, as I understand it, and I have some experience with it outside of NASA, is standardized across agencies and part of our Department of War services. So this is, again, this would be the same if you were to reference ships that are damaged, aircraft-related incidents. The same type of standard is applied. Now, what it triggers can be very different. Here, Type A mishap for sure is going to get the attention of the administrator of NASA, and it's going to require an independent investigation. And that's how this should have always been done, and it's how we are characterizing it today. I don't think there is anything that is flawed about that process. So.
And now we will head to Ken Kramer, Space Up Close.
Thank you for doing this. Very informative. My question, for the administrator and Amit. I've been following this program from the beginning, and my impression has been that Boeing, have just not taken a very aggressive approach, especially related to these service module and RCS thrusters. And that goes to the top of Boeing management. They're always hesitant to provide funding to move forward. So I wonder if you could talk about why they are so hesitant, and the fact that they still have to do tests. It seems to me that should have been done already, and they should have been given top priority a long time ago. So I'd like to know why is there no sense of urgency from Boeing? Thank you.
I appreciate the question. Again, we have, as the administrator said, we discussed this this report with Boeing. We have partnership from Boeing management to discuss, the way forward. We're collaborating with their engineering team to do this work. And in terms of, we're not going to speak for Boeing management. That's on them to speak for themselves. I think what the administrator is trying to communicate, and what I'm trying to communicate, is that we have to own our part of this. What we did, how we led through it, how we acquired the vehicle, how we decided it was qualified, how we behaved when we were operating it, and what we're going to do going forward. And that's the most important thing. It's difficult sometimes to look inward and do that work, but that's mandatory in this business when you're dealing with the rigors of human spaceflight.
And just a reminder, if you have any questions, press *1 to get in the queue. We will now head to Space.com's Mike Wall.
Thank you for doing this. Just a quick question. Based on what we've heard, there's standard definitions of what these different mishap categories represent. So I'm just curious, how did the original team kind of get away with not declaring this as a Type A mishap if it was clear it cost more than $2 million with the damages or with the delays and all of that? What was the rationale at the time to actually not declare it in that category?
I am certainly not going to try and explain it, because we are here to acknowledge that was a mistake. It should have been declared right from the get-go. I don't think this is ambiguous at all. There's a clear dollar threshold here, and the situation itself was, extraordinarily high visibility, right? This was a story that I think captured a lot of people's interest more than a year ago. So that was a mistake. And I think that that is why the independent report investigation, along with the ASAP committee, have arrived at a position that this should have been declared a mishap. And we fully, obviously, concur with it. So that's why we're righting the wrong here and trying to course correct. If you're asking, what were some of the, possibilities of why it was considered, I think we referenced it before, that throughout the development of this program is certainly leading up to flight, on orbit, as we evaluated options of how to bring the crew home, and then post-mission, when we decided what to do about it, The overarching programmatic objective of dissimilar crewed access to orbit was present in those discussions where it probably, especially in certain cases, had no place being there when it directly tied to the mission and crew safety.
Now Anthony Leone with Spectrum News.
Hello, and thank you for taking our questions today. Mr. Isaacman, you explained what the Type A mishap is, but how much danger were Butch and Sonny in, particularly when they're having the thruster issues, and how much of what happened with Starliner impacted Butch and Sonny's decision to retire from NASA? Thank you.
I'm certainly not going to speculate on their decision to retire from NASA. They both had extraordinary careers. Outright unbelievable careers here at NASA, and grateful for all their years of service to science and discovery at NASA. How much danger they were in? Losing 6 DOF control is a huge deal. I actually want to give a lot of credit, and I mentioned it in my remarks earlier, to the flight controllers that made the decision to kind of challenge some of our flight rules and bring that crew to a safe haven, which is the International Space Station. Had that not taken place, had thrusters not been recovered, it could have very well been a different outcome. As I mentioned before, after we did undock Starliner and it autonomously re-entered, it came home zero fault tolerant for another. That was a CM thruster failure that we were not anticipating at the time. So the spaceship was not healthy. And I think everybody absolutely, as I mentioned before, we got to the right place. How we got there was not correct, and that's why we are trying to set the record straight and classify this situation accordingly so lessons are learned and not repeated. But we are grateful we have two astronauts here, and that we did improperly investigate this, and that lessons will be appropriately learned across the agency, and there will be accountability.
Marcia Smith with Space Policy Online.
Thanks so much for taking my question. I think that's the question I still have in my mind, what you just said about there's going to be accountability. What exactly, succinctly, are you trying to change now? You're going to change some of the leadership? Are you going to try and change training or change the culture? Just, in just a couple of sentences, what precisely are you trying to change now?
I think first and foremost, we're trying to send a message about what is the right and wrong way to handle situations like this so that they do not reoccur. I think setting the record straight, classifying as a Type A mishap, ensures what happened here with this mission is appropriately recorded and can be referenced for future learning. This is how you course correct a culture. I do think that what we will have learned from this will inform how we handle future contractual procurements with our vendors. Space is extraordinarily hard right now. I mean, for sure, not taking anything away from SpaceX's success story with Crew Dragon. That was an evolution from Cargo Dragon to Crew Dragon. Lots of demand was able to be forecasted, and they delivered a service that has enabled us to send American astronauts to and from space now for more than 5 years. Our counterparts in Russia are still using Soyuz, which is essentially derived from more than a half-century-old spacecraft. What we're talking about is extremely hard. So I think by properly characterizing this, ensuring that the information is made public, we can look at it when we do subsequent procurements. Are there areas where we should stand back a little bit more and let industry and all their knowledge and experience inform the process? If it's not absolutely critical to safety of flight, for sure, we should welcome their ideas on how to arrive at the right outcome. And then there's areas where it is absolutely imperative, based on all of our years learning and leading in this challenging field of human exploration, that we should be establishing the appropriate requirements and go beyond insight, but proper oversight in that matter. And yes, I do think that as we work through this process, we will look at where there were leadership shortcomings, where people should have stepped in and tried to course correct when it was clear the conversation that was being had was not appropriate for the mission and the crew at hand. And we'll make adjustments. I do want to point out that I think that goes right up the chain of command. I don't know what, even at the most senior levels of the agency, you'd be waiting for to step into than when you had such a high visibility situation on orbit where astronauts no longer, at least at that moment, had a good, safe, certified way to come home. There were a lot of leadership failures in that regard.
Brandon Vigliarolo from The Register was unable to get on the call but sent in his question. He asked, does the blame placed on the CCP for prioritizing contractor results over technical rigor suggest CCP isn't a sustainable or reliable path forward for American spaceflight? Is letting private companies lead space development creating unnecessary risk for astronauts and the future of spaceflight? And I will just note that this is the last question.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I want to pull this way up from the CCP level. CCP is a very successful program, extremely successful program, and helped return American spaceflight capability in the United States after more than a decade when the space shuttle was retired. I mean, a very, what I would consider dark day, or dark decade at NASA is when our dependency went overseas to send our astronauts to and from space, and our CCP program was able to bring that back. And in terms of leveraging private industry and expertise to enable America's space program, we've been doing that since the get-go. I mean, I can't emphasize that enough. People seem to think that's somewhat of a new development. It's not. We didn't get to the moon without the contributions of America's greatest aerospace industries. Boeing and McDonnell Douglas were, it's just some examples of it. And many of those names still exist today, and we also have new ones. And we have new approaches to contracting. Some things we procure, some we develop ourselves, and some we purchase as a service. I think, properly categorizing this situation, ensuring the information is made available, that lessons are learned, we can use that to make sure our culture is correct, our internal expertise is correct, that we restore core competency in the areas that are essential for our mission success, for achieving our national space policy, to make sure that when we design these procurements, we are taking the right approach from a requirements and an insight and oversight perspective. So again, relying on industry to get us there is one of our strengths at NASA. It is not a liability, but there are certainly things we can do better here in order to achieve our objectives. And step one in that is the conversation we have today and the materials we're releasing to you all today.
And with that, I think we will turn over the floor to the Associate Administrator to close us out.
Thanks, Bethany. And again, thanks to everyone for their interest, and of course the Administrator for his incredible leadership here. I think it's really important that we recognize that this is not about, it really is, this is hard to hear, and this for the workforce of NASA. And I've been here in the agency almost 20 years now, and it is hard to hear sometimes when we're talking about our culture and we're talking about how we do things. I think it's important to recognize that this form of leadership allows our culture to get better. And in the past, we've only really had honest conversations about our culture and our leadership and our sense of accountability and how we need to get better after the worst has happened. This was a really challenging event, and in our recent history, as the Administrator said, we almost did have a really terrible day, thanks to the work that the team did in real time, as well as the wisdom that was showed, by the program ultimately afterwards when we were investigating. That worked out, but that transparency is the key. We need to be able to talk freely about, inside the agency, outside the agency, about what we're doing and when we're doing the wrong things. And we always talk about being able to speak up, but we don't all the time. And all of you that are hearing this probably feel that a little bit too. And I want to say that we know that, but we need to get better, and every day we need to get better. And so this transparency, it starts from the top. It starts with the Administrator. It goes through me. It goes to everybody. Everybody owns that. And as we progress towards crewed lunar flight, as we continue to fly ISS, as we continue to develop these vehicles, as we continue to develop the incredible science machines that we're building, we need to be able to speak to each other. NASA is a family, and the extended NASA family outside. A lot of us have, on the outside, on the inside, have known each other for a very long time, and some of that is, it makes it hard sometimes to make sure that we're holding each other accountable, and we understand that. It's really important for you to hear that. We understand that, and this is what we're trying to communicate through this announcement, through the release of the products, and through what we're going to do going forward. Recognizes just how close we all are, but also recognizes that despite that closeness, technical truth and rigor and focus in the right areas is really what we need from everybody. And I would say that, it's also a little bit about, like I said, we are a family, and Butch and Sunny are honestly like family to me. I will just tell you personally, that I've known them both for, almost my entire career. On STS 129, I was the robotics lead for that mission, and Butch and I sat side by side together for hundreds of hours as we're preparing to install pallets on this amazing machine that now has been flying for as long as it has. He's really just a brilliant guy. He's got a great sense of humor. I'll tell you, one time that when my first shift on console as a flight director, they make a big to-do about it, and then basically the flight director is supposed to tell everybody to leave, which I did summarily. But the next thing that happened after that was I got a phone call at the console, and it was Butch, and he was on board as Expedition 40, and he called me, and the first thing he told me was, "Man, it looks like they'll let anybody run this place." That's the kind of guy he is. When he came back from space, even from the Starliner on Crew 9 and during this whole incident, he stood amongst the entire world and said that he was also to blame, and that's an incredible thing. Sunny, same way. I mean, she's again just an incredible American. Just a brilliant astronaut. I first started working with her in STS 116. We were installing 5 trusses, and she's done incredible work in space all throughout the agency. It's interesting. A lot of you probably know. My parents are immigrants. I was born here, but they're from India, and they're naturalized American citizens now. But they still follow. My mom is still with us, and she still follows. She follows Sunny Williams because even in India, she's a rock star. And every time I see Sunny out at lunch or out at happy hour, she will find me, and she will make sure that we take a selfie and send it to my mom, because she knows that just how they have so much grace, and they're so competent, the two of them, and we failed them. The agency failed them, and even though they won't say that, we have to say that. We have to recognize that our responsibility is to them, and to all the crews that are coming, and to the crews that we're about to go fly, and and our responsibility is to each other too. We're a family. So I want you guys, I want everybody to hear that. I want the agency to hear that also, that this is what this is about. This is not about pointing fingers. It's not about assigning blame. It's about making sure that we are holding each other accountable in the incredible tasks that we have to do. And that starts with these sorts of discussions. And again, I think it's worth saying before I close that the reason why Sunny and Butch are on the ground and having incredible adventures, the reason why we have this data that we have, the reason why we have all of the ability to really interrogate and learn from this is because of the amazing people at NASA, because of their ability to react in real time, because of their fealty to technical rigor, because of their adherence to the lessons learned of the past, and making sure that we did conduct this investigation, and that we are holding, that we are doing the right discussions, that we are doing the right tests, and we are going to hold each other accountable so we can do the amazing missions that we have. And so with that, Bethany, I think I'd like to say thanks to everyone for being here, and thanks to the Administrator for your incredible leadership.
And we'll wrap this up. Thank you.